Well, now, y'all settle in close, and 'cause I got a story for you today that's gonna chill you right down to the bone. This here tale ain't just about sickness and dying. No, sir. This is about cruelty, about greed, about what happens when folks forget that every person breathing God's air got a soul worth protecting. And before we get started proper, if you ain't already subscribed to this channel, go on and hit that subscribe button for me, would you? Ring that bell too, 'cause these stories need telling. And if this story touches you the way I know it will, leave a like down below. Now then, let's begin. Picture it now. December 1859. The Ashford plantation sitting there under a Mississippi sky gone all gray and heavy with winter cold. That big white mansion with them tall Greek columns standing proud, cotton fields stretched out empty and brown behind it. Morning fog rolling in thick as molasses. Right there in front of them, slave quarters, stood a man named Isaiah Washington. 27 years old, skin like polished ebony, deep brown eyes that were so tired. Sharp cheekbones, a chin with just the littlest dimple. This man was built strong once, shoulders broad, arms thick with muscle from years of labor pulling cotton from them fields. About a week before Christmas, Isaiah had been sent down to Vicksburg to fetch supplies for the plantation. Vicksburg was a proper river town back then, all busy with merchants and traders, folks buying and selling everything under the sun. There's Isaiah, walking through them brick streets with heavy sacks across his shoulders. Inside one of them warehouses, dark and musty and hot, Isaiah stood receiving boxes from a white merchant with a gray beard. The air in there was close, y'all. Couldn't breathe right. And somewhere in that cramped, airless space where too many people had passed through, Isaiah Washington breathed in something that would kill him. Breathed in death itself. Come evening, Isaiah was walking back to the Ashford place, them heavy sacks on his back making him lean forward with each step. The sun was dropping down behind the trees, painting the sky in oranges and reds. Every step Isaiah took, he felt a little more tired, a little more wrong. His forehead was starting to burn. Y'all, that night, back in them slave quarters, Isaiah laid himself down on a mattress that wasn't nothing but straw stuffed in a cloth sack. One little candle lighting up the whole cabin, showing the gaps in the wooden walls where winter wind came through. And Isaiah, he put his hand to his forehead and felt that heat coming off his skin. Fever. Come December 21st, morning light creeping through them wall cracks. Isaiah woke up, and the fever had done got worse. You could see it on him now, plain as day. Red pustules, that's them raised, inflamed spots, breaking out across his forehead and down his cheeks. His eyes had gone glassy, unfocused. This was smallpox, y'all. So Isaiah, he did the only thing he could think to do. He got down on his knees in front of the overseer, a big white man named Miller. Miller was a hard piece of work. 45 years old, built like a bull, with a brown mustache. He always had a whip coiled up in his hand. Isaiah begged to be allowed to rest. 'Cause the decision wasn't Miller's to make, no, sir. The decision belonged to Colonel Henry Ashford, the master of the plantation. 52 years old, with gray hair slicked back with pomade, a thick mustache trimmed neat as you please, wearing a black suit, gold ring on his finger catching the light. Standing there on the veranda pointing toward them slave quarters. 4 o'clock in the morning, December 24th, Christmas Eve. While Christian folks everywhere were sleeping peaceful, Isaiah Washington was stumbling through the dark to the big house kitchen. That kitchen was enormous, y'all. Brick ovens big enough to roast whole pigs. Copper pots hanging from the ceiling. He gathered up kindling with hands that shook so bad. I need you all to understand something about Isaiah's hands right now. Them hands that had picked cotton, that had built fences. Them hands were covered in open sores, pustules that had burst and were weeping clear fluid mixed with blood. You could see the pink of his palms under all them calluses. Every time he touched something, he left behind a little piece of his sickness. Now they'd gotten hold of an 18-pound turkey for this dinner. Biggest bird you ever saw, sitting there on the preparation table. Isaiah stood over that turkey, hands trembling so bad he could barely hold the knife, and he started seasoning it. He rubbed them herbs into the turkey's skin with his bare hands. With them pustule-covered hands, Lifting that turkey and its heavy silver roasting pan was like lifting the world. Isaiah's arms shook with the effort, muscles that used to be strong now failing him. He carried that bird across the kitchen toward the oven. And y'all, the heat coming off that oven would have been brutal even for a healthy man. Sweat poured off his forehead in rivers. Time passed strange when you're that sick. Isaiah opened that oven again and again throughout the morning, basting that turkey with pan drippings, keeping it moist like he'd been taught. Each time, more sweat fell from his face. Each time, them pustules spread a little further, down his arms now, covering his forearms, creeping onto his chest under that soaked shirt. Meanwhile, in the dining room, everything was being made perfect. That table was a work of art, y'all. Long mahogany polished so bright you could see your face in it. White linen tablecloth without a single wrinkle. Silver candlesticks tall as a man's arm. Fine porcelain plates with painted edges. The room was opulence itself, showing off wealth built on backs like Isaiah's. Mrs. Catherine Ashford, the colonel's wife, swept through that dining room like she owned it, which I suppose she did. 47 years old with blonde hair pinned up in an elaborate bun. She wore a silk dress the color of emeralds, with them big, puffy sleeves. Pearls around her neck worth more than a slave's life. She carried a fan in one hand. Back in that kitchen, around 6 in the evening, Isaiah started to truly fall apart. He grabbed the edge of that wooden preparation table with both hands, holding himself up, and his whole body was shaking like a tree in a hurricane. Them pustules had spread everywhere now, covering his arms completely, climbing up his neck, spreading across his chest. Miller came into that kitchen and saw Isaiah barely standing. And did that overseer show mercy? Did he say maybe this man needs rest? No, sir. He cracked that leather whip through the air, didn't hit Isaiah, just cracked it close enough that the sound echoed off them brick walls like a gunshot. And Isaiah, God help him, straightened up through sheer force of will. Evening came proper now, and you could hear them carriages arriving. Fine wooden carriages all polished and painted, pulled by horses that probably ate better than the slaves did. Lanterns were lit all around the entrance to the mansion, enslaved folks holding torches to light the way. And them guests started arriving in all their finery. One of them carriages stopped and out stepped Mr. and Mrs. Thornton. Robert Thornton was 38 years old, a cotton businessman with wavy brown hair and a neat goatee. He wore a dark suit that fit him perfect. He reached out his gloved hand to help his wife down, and there was Margaret Thornton, 34 years old, wearing a sky blue dress. Then came the Caldwells. Elizabeth Caldwell was 41, wearing a burgundy velvet dress that spoke of old money and good taste. Her red hair was pinned up with ivory combs, and she wore white lace gloves. Her husband, James, 46 years old, stepped down after her wearing a gray suit and carrying a silver-topped cane with a monocle in one eye. Inside that entrance hall, crystal chandeliers blazed with candlelight, making the whole space glow. The Colonel and Mrs. Ashford stood there greeting their guests, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries. The women snapped their fans open and closed. The men lit cigars, everybody laughing at jokes. This was the world they'd built for themselves. Elegant, refined, civilized, they thought. 7 o'clock in the evening. Isaiah lifted that silver platter with the 18-pound turkey on it, golden brown and glistening with juices. The smell must have been incredible. Herbs and roasted meat and Christmas dinner. But Isaiah's arms were shaking so bad the whole platter wobbled. Fever had him in its grip so tight his teeth were chattering. Looking down at that dining table from above, you'd see something that looked like a painting. 10 place settings, all perfect, all gleaming in the candlelight. Crystal glasses catching the glow. Silver forks and knives arranged just so. And right in the center, Isaiah's shaking hands were setting down that turkey on its silver platter, them 10 guests leaning in to look. Isaiah started carving that bird and serving it onto them china plates. His hands, covered in open weeping sores, touched the silver knife and fork, touched the edge of each plate as he set it down. Every movement transferred smallpox virus to the dishes. And y'all, I need you to understand how contagious smallpox is. Isaiah's sweat was falling onto the food. There's Isaiah now, standing beside Mrs. Margaret Thornton in her beautiful blue dress, and he's pouring that rich brown gravy over her roasted potatoes. The silver gravy boat is heavy in his diseased hands. You can see them fingers wrapped around the handle, pustules clear as day, and his fingers touch the side of her plate as he steadies himself. Round and round that table Isaiah went, carrying a bottle of Bordeaux wine that probably cost more than a year's worth of clothes for all the slaves on the plantation put together. He poured that deep red wine into crystal glasses, one by one, going to each guest, and every time his fingers touched the rim of the glass, Isaiah made it back to the kitchen, and that's when his body finally said no more. He collapsed against that brick wall, his shoulder hitting hard, and then he just slid down to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. His eyes rolled back in his head. Other enslaved folks working in the kitchen ran over to help him. But in that dining room, nobody knew nothing about it. Them guests were eating with genuine pleasure, cutting into that contaminated turkey with their silver knives, bringing forkfuls of disease to their mouths. Conversations flowing like that expensive wine, laughter bouncing off the walls, candlelight making everybody look healthy and happy and alive. The colonel himself, sitting at the head of that table, chewing that turkey and looking mighty satisfied with himself. His mustache moving as he ate, that gold ring on his finger catching the light. He's got a wine glass in his right hand, and he's talking about his cotton business, about his investments, about how successful he is. Out back of that kitchen, in a dark corner where the guests can't see or hear, Miller is taking his whip to Isaiah's back, red marks appearing across skin that's already covered in scars from previous beatings. This is what slavery was, y'all. Beating a dying man to make him work harder. Isaiah's biting his own lip to keep from screaming. Here comes Isaiah again, stumbling back into that dining room with a platter of roasted vegetables. His face is completely soaked now, sweat pouring down like rain. Them pustules have spread up to his hairline. You can see them on his forehead, on his temples, clustering around his ears. His hands are shaking so bad the vegetables are sliding around on the platter. Mrs. Catherine Ashford, the lady of the house, she's eating them potatoes that Isaiah's diseased hands touched. Her fork goes into the food, comes up to her mouth. She's chewing delicately, the way wealthy ladies do, while talking to Mrs. Caldwell about fashion from Paris. That pearl necklace at her throat catches the candlelight. Mr. Robert Thornton, the cotton investor. He's dabbing at his lips with a white linen napkin after eating that contaminated turkey. Smiling, satisfied, talking with another guest about business investments. His goatee is trimmed perfect. His suit is immaculate. He looks like the picture of health and success. He's got 2.5 weeks left to live. Second time Isaiah fainted, and this one was worse. He dropped right there in the middle of the kitchen down on his knees, hands slamming into them brick floor tiles. His whole body started shaking, convulsing almost, like his muscles didn't know what to do anymore. Other enslaved folks gathered around, their faces showing horror and pity. Miller came back in, grabbed Isaiah by the arms and hauled him up like he was a sack of grain, not a dying man. Dragged him to his feet, held him upright, screaming in his face. Though we can't hear the words, we can see the rage. That whip raised up again, threatening, and Isaiah somehow found the strength to stand. The dessert was pecan pie, and Isaiah's hands as he arranged them slices on china plates were something terrible to see. Every finger was swollen now, covered in pustules that had burst and scabbed over and burst again. The skin was red and inflamed. And he's touching these dessert plates, arranging the slices just so, and his vision is blurring from the fever. Into that dining room one more time, Isaiah carrying the dessert tray. Each step was an effort now, his feet dragging a little, his body tilted forward from exhaustion. The guests are still talking, still laughing, not even looking at him. He's invisible to them, always has been. Just the hands that bring the food. Isaiah serving that pecan pie to Mrs. Elizabeth Caldwell in her burgundy velvet dress. She's accepting the plate with barely a nod, not even a thank you, just an absent-minded gesture like he's a piece of furniture that moves. And his fingers, Them diseased, pustule-covered fingers, they brush against the rim of that china plate. Last guest to be served. Isaiah's body is trembling so violently now that the whole tray is shaking. His vision is going dark around the edges, like looking through a tunnel. The silver tray slips in his hands, tilts dangerous to one side, and for a second it looks like he's gonna drop the whole thing. But somehow he catches it. And then it happened. Right there in the dining room in front of all them fine guests, Isaiah Washington collapsed. His body went down heavy, hitting that polished marble floor with a sound like thunder. The silver tray clattered beside him, echoing through the suddenly silent room. Every conversation stopped. Every fork paused halfway to every mouth. The colonel shot up from his chair so fast it nearly tipped over backward, threw his napkin down on top of his half-eaten dessert, and he pointed at Isaiah's body on the floor with all the authority of a man who thinks he owns the world. And he's gesturing, ordering, commanding, "Get this man out of here." This man. 2 enslaved men came and grabbed Isaiah under the arms, lifting his limp body off that floor. Each man taking a side, Isaiah's head lolling forward, his feet dragging behind him as they carried him away. And behind them, in that dining room, you could already hear the sounds of conversation starting up again, laughter coming back. Through the cold December night they carried him, back toward them slave quarters. The moon was full overhead, lighting up the dirt path. It was so cold their breath came out in white clouds, frost starting to form on the dead grass. And Isaiah, he was completely limp between them 2 men, his body just hanging there. Inside that slave cabin, they laid Isaiah down on his straw mattress. Other folks crowded around, their faces showing every emotion: fear, pity, anger, helplessness. A single candle flickering, barely pushing back the dark. An old woman, her hair white as cotton, she kneeled down beside Isaiah and put a wet cloth on his burning forehead. Look at his face now in the candlelight. Isaiah's whole face covered in them pustules, his forehead, his cheeks, his neck, everywhere. Red inflamed spots with white pustular centers, clusters of them, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, his skin shining with fever sweat. His breathing so shallow and fast you could barely see his chest moving. Christmas morning, 1860. The Ashford mansion sitting pretty under a winter sun that was just starting to rise. Smoke coming up gentle from them chimneys. Everything looking peaceful and normal and fine. The guests were still there, having stayed the night in the mansion's guest rooms. They'd sleep in late, have a nice breakfast, exchange Christmas pleasantries. December 26th, in them slave quarters. Isaiah lying on that straw mattress under a thin, ragged blanket that couldn't keep nobody warm. His body shaking with fever chills despite the blanket. Them pustules spreading down his arms now, across his chest, anywhere there was skin. He's alone in the cabin 'cause everybody else is out working in the fields. Back at the mansion, December 28th, Mrs. Margaret Thornton is sitting in the parlor on a velvet armchair. She's still wearing her fine clothes, still looking like a lady of society, but her hand goes up to her forehead, and there's something wrong. Her face shows confusion first, then worry. Her skin feels hot under her gloved hand. December 29th, morning light coming through the window of a guest bedroom. Mr. Robert Thornton standing in front of a gilt-framed mirror, and his fingers go up to touch his cheeks. Small red bumps. Just little ones, barely noticeable. But they're there, eruptions starting to form on his face. His expression changes from confusion to concern. Mrs. Elizabeth Caldwell in her burgundy dress, December 30th, fainting in her guest room. Her body falling back onto the 4-poster bed, the dress spreading out around her. Her maid, an enslaved woman, running over to help, trying to wake her up. And Mrs. Caldwell's forehead, it's slick with sweat. Fever sweat. New Year's Eve morning, December 31st, 1859. Last day of the decade. In that slave cabin, Isaiah is dying. His whole body covered in pustular crusts now, scabs forming over burst pustules, bleeding, weeping. He can barely breathe, each breath a ragged whisper. His eyes are half open but seeing nothing. Close on Isaiah's face, noon on December 31st. Every inch of visible skin covered in crusted, bleeding pustules. His lips cracked and dry, his eyes unfocused, staring at the wooden ceiling but not seeing it. He's somewhere else now, somewhere beyond pain maybe. And then, one last breath. Just a whisper of air leaving his lungs. They wrapped his body in a white sheet, stained already from his weeping sores, and tied it with rough rope. 2 men carried him out of that cabin into the winter sunlight. The sky above was gray, heavy with clouds. Their faces showed sadness, but also fear. They knew this disease was contagious. They buried Isaiah in an isolated spot beyond the fields, away from everything. Dug a shallow grave as fast as they could. The ground was half frozen, made the digging hard. Lowered his sheet-wrapped body into that cold earth. Started shoveling dirt back over him. No coffin, no marker, no ceremony or kind words. January 2nd, 1860. The Ashford mansion from inside now. Looking at them closed guest room doors in the upstairs hallway. A doctor with white hair and a black leather medical bag hurrying up the stairs, his face grave. Enslaved servants whispering in the corridors, their voices low and worried. Inside the Thorntons' room, both Mr. and Mrs. Thornton are in bed now. Robert's nightshirt soaked through with sweat. Margaret sitting up in a chair beside the bed, but she's just as sick. Both of their faces showing pustular eruptions. The rash spreading down their necks. They're both fevered, both in pain. The doctor examining Mrs. Elizabeth Caldwell now, and you can see by his face that it's bad. She's lying in bed in a white nightgown, moaning in pain. Her face covered in them red pustular spots. And the doctor, he steps back from the bed with this grave expression. He recognizes smallpox immediately. January 3rd, the colonel in his study. Big wooden desk, leather chair, oil paintings on the walls. And he's sitting there, touching his own forehead. His hand trembles as he pulls it away and looks at it. Pustules forming on his hands now, red spots that he knows the meaning of. Downstairs, emergency meeting in the main hall. The doctor trying to explain the situation to the guests who aren't showing symptoms yet. Everybody standing far apart from each other now, nobody wanting to get close. Windows thrown open even though it's January, trying to air out the house. And just like that, the healthy guests are fleeing. Carriages being loaded up in a hurry, trunks thrown on top, horses being whipped to go faster. They're running from the Ashford plantation like it's on fire. Leaving behind the sick ones, leaving behind the Thorntons, the Caldwells, the colonel and his wife. January 8th, the colonel's master bedroom. Big 4-poster bed with velvet curtains. And there's the colonel lying in that bed covered in pustules, his whole body erupting with them. Mrs. Catherine beside him, also sick but not quite as bad. Servants standing in the doorway, afraid to come in. January 12th, inside a dark guest room. Mrs. Margaret Thornton dying now, her beautiful face destroyed by pustular crusts that cover every inch of skin. Her body wasted away under them sheets to almost nothing, her breath coming in irregular gasps, and in the bed next to hers, her husband Robert just as sick. Dawn on January 15th. That guest room silent now. A sheet being pulled up over Mrs. Margaret Thornton's face by her maid, an enslaved woman wearing a cloth mask. Tears running down that maid's face. First of the dinner guests to die. 34 years old, came to a Christmas party and never went home. That same day, January 15th, afternoon now. Another room, another body. Mrs. Elizabeth Caldwell dead in her white nightgown, her face permanently disfigured by them crusted pustules. 2 deaths in one day. The horror mounting, the mansion becoming a house of death. Servants are terrified now. January 18th morning. Mr. Robert Thornton in the final stage. His body consumed by the disease, nothing left but skin and bones and pustular crusts bleeding and weeping. Each breath is torture. And then, no more breaths. He's gone. 3rd death among the 10 dinner guests. Bodies being carried out of the mansion now, wrapped in sheets, loaded onto a wooden cart by men wearing cloth masks and gloves. The sky overhead is cloudy and gray, fitting for the grim work. More guests and family members watching from the upper windows, their faces pressed against the glass. January 20th, View of the Ashford plantation from a distance. Black smoke rising from multiple spots on the property. The state health doctor had ordered a burning, contaminated clothes, bedding, furniture, anything the sick people touched. Men with torches setting fire to expensive items that used to be symbols of wealth. January 28th. The colonel survived. But look at him now, standing in front of a mirror. His face is ruined. Deep pockmarks, scars, permanent disfigurement from the pustules that covered him. The handsome, proud man he used to be is gone forever. He stares at his reflection with absolute desolation. Mrs. Catherine Ashford survived too, with less severe scarring, but scarring nonetheless. She sits alone in the parlor. Half the furniture is gone now, burned or sold to pay debts. She stares out the window at nothing, her face empty of expression. She's lost friends, lost her social standing, lost her beauty. The city of Vicksburg, late January 1860. The disease has spread through the streets now, houses marked with red cloths, signs of quarantine, sick people being transported on carts to makeshift hospitals, the whole city gripped by epidemic. This is what one Christmas dinner did. Inside a church converted to a hospital, rows and rows of people lying on straw mattresses on the floor. Men, women, children. Black and white both, because disease don't care about skin color. All of them covered in pustules. All of them suffering. Doctors and nurses moving between them, exhausted. The cemetery is packed now. Multiple burials happening at the same time. Graves being dug in rows, wooden coffins, families standing far back because they're afraid of catching the disease even from the dead. A priest moving from grave to grave, conducting quick ceremonies. No time for proper mourning. February 10th, 1860. An official death registry, leather-bound book open on a desk. A hand with a quill pen writing names in black ink. Page after page filled with the dead. The final count being recorded, 89 infected across Warren County. 34 deaths. The Ashford plantation from above, showing the devastation. The main house still standing but looking empty and dead. The slave quarters burned completely to the ground, nothing left but ash and charred wood. Smoke still rising in places. The fields empty and untended. Total destruction ordered by the health authorities. The colonel sitting in his study, head in his scarred hands. Stacks of bills and debt notices covering his desk. His cotton business ruined. His investors dead or fled. His reputation destroyed. His face disfigured. And he's just sitting there, broken. Completely broken. You reap what you sow. Where the slave quarters used to be, there's nothing now but ash and debris. Charred wood, broken brick, smoke-stained earth. And in one spot, a rough wooden cross. Barely visible, half buried in the ashes. That cross marks where Isaiah Washington was buried. The only sign that lives existed here. A newspaper from Vicksburg, February 1860. The front page printed in black ink, the headline screaming about the smallpox epidemic. An illustration showing the Ashford mansion. Text describing the outbreak that started at the Christmas dinner. The scandal spreading through print the way the disease spread through people. The Warren County Courthouse, a meeting of authorities. The judge in his black robes, white-haired and stern. Doctors and officials gathered around a table covered in maps. Red marks showing the spread of the disease radiating out from the Ashford plantation like ripples in water. Families in mourning, widows in black dresses, orphaned children, men who lost wives. All of them connected to that Christmas dinner, either directly or indirectly. Some show visible scarring on their faces from surviving the disease. Others are crying over the ones who didn't survive. February 20th, the church packed for a memorial service. Every pew filled with survivors and mourners. The priest at the pulpit, probably trying to make sense of senseless tragedy. Candles lit everywhere, white flowers, the symbols of mourning and hope for the dead. Spring coming to the plantation, March 1860. The fields starting to turn green again with new grass. Life returning to the land. But the mansion sits silent, windows shuttered, most of it abandoned now. The air around it feels haunted, heavy. Some places carry the weight of what happened there. The colonel walking alone through his empty fields, spring sunshine overhead. He's leaning on a cane now, older than his years. His scarred face turned toward where the slave quarters used to be, now just burned ruins. The weight of guilt visible in the curve of his back, the slow way he moves. Mrs. Catherine kneeling near where the quarters used to be, placing wildflowers on the ashes. Spring flowers, purple and yellow and white. It's the first human gesture we've seen from her. The first sign she sees the enslaved as people. Tears on her scarred face. In Vicksburg, survivors of the outbreak meeting together, their faces marked with pox scars, some missing fingers or parts of ears from the disease, but they're supporting each other, sharing their stories, rebuilding community from trauma. Black and white both brought together by shared suffering. An official document from the state of Mississippi, an 1860 health report. Formal language describing the Ashford plantation outbreak. Statistics in cold numbers, 89 infected, 34 dead. Recommendations for preventing future epidemics. The whole tragedy reduced to bureaucratic text, filed away in government archives. Summer, 1860. A black child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, placing fresh wildflowers on that wooden cross marking Isaiah's grave. The fields around are green and alive now, sky bright blue overhead. This small gesture of remembrance for a man forgotten by almost everyone else. Sunset over the abandoned Ashford plantation. The buildings deteriorating now, paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked. Nature starting to reclaim the land, vines growing up the walls, weeds taking over the yard. The silhouette of the mansion against an orange and purple sky. An old Bible open to passages about pestilence and judgment. An aged hand turning the yellowed pages. A candle providing the only light. Religious symbols, crosses, icons. The people of that time tried to understand this tragedy through their faith. A map of Warren County with red ink showing the spread of smallpox from the Ashford plantation outward in concentric circles. Like a stone thrown in water, ripples spreading out from the center. Visual evidence of how one sick man at one dinner infected 10 people, who infected their families. Autumn leaves falling over the ruins of the slave quarters. End of 1860 now. Red and gold leaves drifting down, covering the charred wood and ashes. Nature putting a blanket over the scars. Time passing, the seasons turning. Life going on the way it always does, even after tragedy. A simulated sepia photograph from that era, showing a group of smallpox survivors. Men and women in Victorian clothing, their faces bearing the characteristic pox scars of the disease. They stare at the camera with serious expressions. Nobody smiled in photographs back then. Vicksburg Cemetery, winter of 1860. Snow lightly covering simple wooden grave markers for the epidemic victims. Trees bare against a gray sky. Complete silence, as if the world itself is mourning. This is a natural memorial to the forgotten dead. Interior of a simple house, a free black family gathered around the fireplace in 1861, and grandfather telling his grandchildren the story of Isaiah Washington, the children listening with wide eyes, learning their history through oral tradition. The Ashford plantation completely abandoned now, 1865 after the Civil War ended. Buildings in ruins, windows broken, doors hanging open and banging in the wind. Wild nature reclaiming the land, trees growing up through the floorboards, kudzu covering the walls. A history book being opened, 20th century now. A chapter about epidemics in the pre-vaccine era. A mention of the 1860 smallpox outbreak in Mississippi. The story finally being told beyond oral tradition. A modern historical marker. Artistic representation of an educational plaque at the site of the former Ashford plantation. Text summarizing the events of 1859 to 1860. Visitors reading, learning, understanding. Isaiah's original wooden cross, now aged and weathered, leaning at an angle almost invisible in the tall grass. But sunlight breaks through clouds and illuminates that spot, creating a moment of peace and beauty. The sky at sunset over where the plantation used to be. Dramatic clouds and shades of gold and crimson and purple. light breaking through in rays, beautiful and terrible. It's an image of beauty emerging from tragedy, hands of different colors clasped together, a modern symbolic representation, black hands and white hands intertwined in unity. This represents reconciliation, learning from the past, choosing a better future. A historical vial of smallpox vaccine, glass bottle with clear liquid, an old-fashioned syringe beside it. This represents the medical progress that eventually conquered the disease that killed Isaiah, and so many others. Inside a museum dedicated to the history of slavery. Iron chains and shackles displayed behind protective glass. Visitors of all backgrounds standing quietly, respectfully, learning about the horrors of the past. A memorial to enslaved people. A stone monument with names carved into it, including Isaiah Washington. Fresh flowers placed at its base by someone who cares. Recognition of the humanity that was denied in life. A modern cotton field. Mechanical harvesters doing the work. Free laborers working for wages, going home to their families at the end of the day. The dramatic contrast to 1859 is obvious. Sunset over the Mississippi River, the water reflecting orange and gold light, modern boats passing by. The river has witnessed centuries of history, flowing indifferent to human drama, but bearing witness to all of it. The night sky over Mississippi, stars brilliant against the darkness, the Milky Way visible in all its glory. The vastness of the cosmos, billions of stars. It puts human tragedies in a larger context. Dawn breaking over the fields where the slave quarters once stood. Golden light bathing the earth, a new day beginning. This symbolizes hope and renewal, the eternal cycle of nature, life continuing always. And that's what we're doing here, y'all. We're remembering Isaiah Washington. We're honoring his life, we're learning from his story, and we're making sure that his suffering teaches us to be better, to treat each other with dignity, to recognize the humanity in every person, to never forget that cruelty has consequences. Now y'all take that lesson with you. Remember Isaiah. Remember what happened when people forgot that every life has value, and make sure it never happens again. That's all I got for you today. Thank you for listening. God bless.